All right, great to be here. And I'm looking for my panelists. See who is here with me. All right, so starting with what I'm going to do first is introduce everybody, including myself, and then we'll get on to our questions. And the questions that we have today for the panel is that we'll start with a brief 5-minute introduction. Each member will give a 5-minute introduction of yourself and what you do. That will be followed by describing your approach for supporting autistic individuals. And so we'll be looking at a number of approaches, your approach. We're then going to look at what is the most important takeaway that you have from your work, working with autistic people. And then we'll wrap it up with what have you learned from your colleagues today? We're on the panel table, and we open it up to questions. So introducing this panel focuses on different approaches. There's many approaches and methods for supporting autistic individuals, and I think it's important to be aware of the well thought out approaches that are in use today. That is an original area of my research, my doctoral dissertation, where I looked at a number of approaches such as ABA, floor time, TEACH, daily life therapy, Miller method, and so on. And my idea was to turn away from the conversation of trying to prove which approach is the best and towards getting a sense of these different approaches. What are their strengths? How can they best support individuals? And matching reasoned practice with individual profiles. Because the autism spectrum is so wide and diverse, it only stands the truth that different approaches are going to help different people. And so by making that match, we'll all be better off. So we're going to start off with John Graham. John Graham shipped out on a freighter train when he was 16, hitchhiked through the Algerian Revolution at 19, he sure made the rounds, and was on the team that made the first ascent of Denali's North Wall at 20. That's great. A climb so dangerous that it's never been repeated. He hitchhiked around the world at 22, working as a correspondent in every war he came across, a U.S. Foreign Service officer for 15 years. He was in the middle of the 1969 revolution in Libya and the war in Vietnam. For the young Graham, adventure was everything, and each brush with death only pushed him to up the ante and to bury ever deeper the emotional life needed to make him whole. Then it changed, sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, including during one night at the height of a battle in Vietnam. At the United Nations, he risked his career crossing his own government to support peace initiatives in South Africa and Cuba. Then came the all or nothing bet he was forced to make, fighting for his life in a lifeboat in the middle of a typhoon. Good grief, when his ship caught fire and sank in the Gulf of Alaska. That sounds really cold. And for the last 40 years, Graham has been a leader of the Giraffe Heroes Project, a global movement inspiring people to stick their necks out to solve public problems, giving them tools to succeed at giraffe.org. As a peace builder, he's helped end apartheid in South Africa, avert a major strike in Canada, save what is left of the Everglades, and find long-term environmental solutions in the Pacific Northwest. His books include Outdoor Leadership, Stick Your Neck Out, a street smart guide to creating change in your community and beyond, It's Up to Us, and a memoir, Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning. We now move over to Jonathan Alderson, who is the founder and director of the Multi-Integrative Multi-Treatment Intervention Program, which integrates play therapy, structured learning, ABA, sensory, and biomedical treatments for autism. With a master's from Harvard and significant experience in autism treatment, Alderson has worked globally with over 3,000 families. He trained for 8 years at the Autism Treatment Center of America's Sunrise program with Ron Kaufman and Barry Kaufman. I'm familiar with both, and has served as the chair of the Professional Advisory Committee at Seneca College. Alderson authored Challenging the Myths of Autism. There's plenty of myths that we need to blow out. That could be a whole panel unto itself. Winning 7 awards, including Mom's Choice Gold Award. In 2022, he founded Health Innovations Platform Incorporated to enhance family support through the Thrive Guide online resource. We're now moving on to Alan Kadish. Is a practicing concierge physician, fondly called a doctor detective. A lot of doctoring involves being a detective. Supporting autistic people often requires being a detective. His practice focuses on complex cases requiring a careful, curious look at a patient's health. He's been seeing patients with autism and pervasive developmental delays for 40 years, using both conventional and alternative approaches for diagnoses and therapeutics. Dr. Kadish's approach includes taking a comprehensive history using advanced laboratory testing, together with a biomedical approach that has yielded significant success for his patients worldwide. He is currently accepting new patients and can be contacted at centerofhealth.com. We are now looking at Superman here, Bill Peters, QBE, who is an autistic person just like me, an autistic advocate who spends his time finding ways to support individuals, autistic individuals and others with various differences and disabilities. Bill takes an international approach to this. He spent 10 years, if memory serves me right, working with Child with Future in Ukraine, traveling to people's houses, being what he refers to as the field man. And what that means is that he goes out and he'll live with parents, with families who have an autistic or otherwise child with a difference, and works with that family and the greater community as well to better understand their autistic child and provide support. Currently, Bill is nearing the end of, 4 years in Azerbaijan, 3 years in Azerbaijan.
3 years.
Okay, 3 years, where for a period of time he was the director of House of Dreams. And where Bill's adventure is going to take him next, well, we know he is going to go to Turkey. He's going to spend some time out in the UK. And where Bill stops, round and round Bill goes. Where he stops, nobody knows.
Possibly Albania, but other places I'm looking into as well. But I would like to get a more permanent residency after the UK, or finding another place after Turkey and the UK.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And then there's me. I'm Stephen Shore. I am an autistic professor at Adelphi University, focusing most of my efforts in teaching and research on issues related to the autism spectrum. My initial research focused on comparative approaches with the goal of matching best practice to individual needs. When I am not at the university teaching and researching, I'm traveling the globe to a different country about once a month. 58 countries across 6 continents so far and counting, and that's only counting the countries that I've actually been to. If I toss in the online presentations, I don't know what the number is. It could be up into the 70s, in the 80s, but somehow I suspect that John Graham has been to more countries than I have. When I'm not doing that, I am writing books and articles on issues related to the autism spectrum. And during the rare times I'm home, I give music lessons to autistic children and adults. So with that introduction, we now move on to further introduction to each member of the panel. And the idea is that each member will give a 5 introduction to themselves. I already did some of that introduction. If there's something I missed, throw it in there and tell us what you do. And I'm gonna go in order that I see you all on the screen. And Alan, you appear to be at the top here, so you're on.
All right, so what do I do? For the ASD, PDD community, one of my founding starting points was, and I'll never forget the opportunity, back in the 1980s, I had a number of folks come to my office and they were literally dismissed by the general medical community because they were too difficult. And they indeed were ASD individuals who had a litany of potential that wasn't being expressed medically, emotionally, and physically. And it really sparked an interest because I love playing detective. My wife calls me that on a regular basis. And why is that? Because you have to think outside the box. This isn't the same old, everybody gets a pill, you're going to be fine. It really never was there, never should have been thought that way, but that was and still maintains itself as the nature of medical services for many people, sadly. With that said, I, at the time, had limited access because, as you can imagine, laboratory facilities and laboratory testing has exploded radically. So whether we talk genetics, whether we talk microbiome, whether we consider aspects of cellular metabolism, all of these components are now very much accessible to, and within reason monetarily, to be able to really get an idea what's happening from a medical point of view. It's in some ways described as biomedical approach. Some people call it functional medicine. I don't care what the name is. The bottom line is, what are you looking at? What's going on from a cellular level? We can do that these days. And by being able to now interpret and extrapolate, you can develop a number of therapeutic interventions that truly make sense. And when I say that, so that people don't misunderstand, I'm not suggesting nor implying just prescriptive medication. Whether it's everything from amino acids to vitamins, minerals, glandulars, and indeed, I do use medications when appropriate. All of those play a part that can make an amazing change in someone's ability to function. That's what I do. That's what I love. That's what I'm going to continue to do. And it's been a fascinating, wonderful ride to be able to help people and really see that when you take a good history, a good laboratory assessment, and then translate that, you really do see change.
All right. Well, thanks for a great summary of what you do. And there is a place for medicine in autism. There are some conditions that we see that do tend to occur in autistic individuals. And it's great to see your focus is on good health. And everybody is going to function better if they're healthy. Autistic.
Absolutely.
Otherwise.
Absolutely.
Stephen, I think, sorry, I'm just going to, I know I'm speaking out of line, but I know Alan's work and other physicians like that. I think it stands to say, and this is important for any parents listening, that certainly for many autistic individuals who may not communicate in typical neurotypical ways, who may not have language or who may find it difficult to communicate, it's we know from research that just common ailments are way underdiagnosed in the autistic population. Because of that, a child might not be able to say, "Mom, I have a headache," or "I have a sore stomach," number one. And number two, because oftentimes medical doctors will dismiss certain symptoms as, "Oh, that's just autism."
Yeah, you
And so
said
they
it before
don't
I
take
did.
that,
I'm gonna say.
right? And they don't take that step to see, well, maybe this child has something going on. And I think doctors like you, Alan, who lean in, and as you said, you're a detective. I think it's a really important thing for parents to feel empowered to find doctors like this who will investigate and look. It's not all about trying to change autistic behavior, but it's often just trying, as you said, help individuals with autism have the right to be as healthy as anyone else, but may lack that communication to be able to tell us what symptoms they're feeling. So I'll stop talking, but I think that's a really important part of what Alan does as well.
That's
Thank you,
important.
Jonathan. Much appreciate the piece. You know, in today's conversation that I had earlier this morning on our conference, we talked about, and actually I showed what's called an EPP. Let me just spend a moment on this. I think this is important, and it's overlooked so frequently, it's crazy. An EPP is an environmental pollutant panel. It's a urinary collection, so very simple, non-invasive. It is amazing to me how frequently we will find all sorts of problematic toxins in someone's body that manifest in autistic-like behaviors and, of course, impact their health radically. And it's less than a couple $100. So it's just one of those, why wouldn't you do it? But thank you again, Jonathan. I really appreciate the fact that somebody recognizes good health, period. And then you can work forward.
Yeah, that's important for everybody, autistic or otherwise. So now we're going to move on. I see Bill is next up in the order. So we're going to Bill Peters, who will now spend 5 minutes finishing up any additional introduction to themselves if they need to, and what do you do?
Okay, so for 10 years or so before the war in Ukraine, I worked for Child with a Future Ukraine, being the field man. I worked in the community, worked with families in the community, worked with schools in the community, worked with communities in general. I also gave lectures and talks to different groups. I helped at summer camps. I did things. For 3 years now in Azerbaijan, I helped run an autism center called House of Dreams. We worked one-on-one with children there. And now I'm going to go help a friend in Turkey for a bit next month. And then I'm going to go to the UK to reconnect with some friends from Child with a Future. And then I am looking for another country to do my community work in. Right now I'm looking at Albania, but I'm open to other countries and other autism groups that are looking for somebody like me who goes out and actually teaches skills and does community relations. That's really what I do. I have also done autism conferences around the world and talks with Stephen Mark Shore, my wonderful friend and mentor. We just did something in India. What was that, about 2 months ago now, Stephen?
Yeah, in August, yes.
Yeah. India with Stephen was fun. India with Stephen was a blast. And that's what I do. Really, I grew up in the USA, in the Midwest, the West Coast, finished high school, life kind of stagnated out. I reached out after meeting Stephen to some groups on Facebook that were in Eastern Europe. That's how I connected with Child with a Future, and the rest, as they say, is history. I'm not nearly as impressive as John next to me, who, as Stephen was listing him off, I'm going, I'm the amateur in the room, oh my gosh, but I really do enjoy doing community outreach and things. And that's really what I do. I really am super happy to be here with all of you on this panel, to hear you guys out, to hear different things. and to take questions from people in the general public. The reason I may look a little frazzled is it is 3:24 in the morning in Azerbaijan, and I am here on this panel ready and wearing to go because Stephen and others invited me. I did this whole setup in 30 minutes because I decided that my living room is the only room that's really insulated from most of my neighbors. The neighbors upstairs might be able to hear me, but I hear them all night as well. So, man. But this is what I do. And I really enjoy my life doing it. And I will yield the floor to the next person.
All right, Bill, thank you for your introduction, and probably a good way to think about what Bill does is community service and working out in the field. All right, we move on to Jonathan.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Stephen. And nice to be here on the panel. I'm honored to be part of this great group. I'll just say the last time, Stephen, that I saw you, you may not remember, but we were both invited for a one-day sort of workshop at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It was in Longfellow Hall upstairs, I remember, and you were doing a breakout session and I did a breakout session. And I have admired your work and followed your work all the way back to Autism for Dummies and others. And I had just published my book, Challenging the Myths of Autism. And I had a strong feeling that you would be very well aligned with a book that took 7 what I call myths or negative stereotypes that certainly limit the way that a parent or a physician might approach an individual on the autistic spectrum. And I shared that book with you, and you read it, or parts of it from what I understand, and kindly wrote a nice, what we call an endorsement, and certainly some nice words about it.
I remember that.
But in any case, if it's still on your shelf or you have it dusted off, remarkably, sadly, I wrote it in 2011, sadly, it's really very important to still get these ideas out. I say sadly because I would have hoped by now that thinking would change around this, but it seems to persist. In any case, I'll talk just a little bit about what I do. I'd like to just focus in for the parents listening and professionals listening. The way to think about what I do, Stephen in the introduction talked about integrative multi-treatment approach. And the story behind that is I began my studies and interest in human development. So how do we grow up? How do we learn? How does the brain grow? How do we learn to crawl and to do up our zipper and draw a circle and all of this stuff? I was quite interested in how that happened. And you know, part of the way that studies are set up in psychology is we also study how it sometimes doesn't happen in a neurotypical way. So there is this crazy title of a course back then called Abnormal Psychology and Abnormal Development. I'm sort of giggling because we wouldn't use that term anymore. We've sort of grown up and understand neurodiversity and neurodivergence and things. But that's when I was first introduced to autism. And back then, way back then, there's about 3 pages in an entire psychology book on the little that we knew about autism. Well, what happened to me next is I came down to Massachusetts from Canada, and I stumbled upon this place called the Sunrise Program. As Stephen mentioned, he knows about that, and some of you listening might. And what was fascinating for me is I got a chance to see a play therapy session. And this was coming out of a number of years of behavioral science when I studied Skinner and Pavlov and had to train, you know, a rat in a cage to press levers and stuff. And so it was understanding behavioral science. But here was a therapist, a young adult who was running around a room, tickling a child, and they were giggling, but then also dealing with some tantrums and trying to figure out a way to communicate. And my eyes were wide open. And I decided to sign up for a 1-year training program to learn how to engage with individuals with different needs and abilities and in communication. And I ended up staying for 8 years. I was going to be there for a year. I stayed for 8 because I was so drawn in. And what happened then is, as I was training and learning, the basis of this was engagement through respect and love and compassion. And they had an approach, for example, called joining. Stephen will have heard about that, and some of you had, where we sort of, instead of trying to stop an autistic individual from ritualistic behavior or routines they might have, we try and understand it and approach it with curiosity. And, oh, you're rocking back and forth, or you're flapping hands, or you need to say something over and over. What's that about? How could I be part of that in a respectful way? And this really opened up my eyes. But here's what happened, Stephen, is with working with hundreds of parents, I leaned in and listened. And it turns out that for every single family that we worked with in the Sunrise program, they were doing other things. These families were seeing doctors like Alan and going and checking out what might be happening on biological level. They were going to music therapy and seeing how music might be an interest, right? Stephen has such music lessons and understands the incredible doors that could open for any child, but in particular, people on the spectrum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I learned over those 8 years was that an individual on the autism spectrum has a wide range, like any human on the planet, of needs and strengths and challenges and so on and so forth. And that led me to understand that if you really want to help an individual be their best, grow their strengths, be able to function and integrate and have a wonderful life, you absolutely must draw from a whole range of approaches, of supports and treatments and therapies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just jump to what I'm doing now is I began a process of trying to understand my own learning process, of trying to understand exactly what, Stephen, you articulated in the beginning. I don't know if you saw my big smile, but we're so aligned. And that is, I would try to understand what was the profile of an individual that would best match a particular approach. What was the profile that best would match?
I saw your expression.
Right, a particular approach. And this to me is absolutely critical. Parents who are listening, you know, it's easy to look for the approach that has the most evidence behind it, for example, or the one that has the best, you know, parent endorsement or something like this. But you should be asking, in my opinion, what, from my child's unique profile, and we could unpack what that means. What does that profile mean? From Alan's perspective, it's going to mean a biomedical, biological profile. He's looking at, as he said, you know, different kind of tests that can start letting him know what the profile of that individual's body is. From a developmental perspective, we might say, what's the unique developmental profile of this child? From a genetic perspective,
absolutely.
we can say,
I want to respect other people's
right?
time.
Yes. Sorry.
We get to them before we, before they cut us off.
So I'll land the plane here, which is what I now do is an online program called Thrive Guide, where we're able to take a child's individual profile and match it to a treatment approach, what we call a treatment map, and help put you in the right direction. So I'll pause there.
All right, good. And we'll get more into that when we get to the describing your approach for supporting autistic individuals. And we've got Alan over here who definitely has something to say.
So thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate the input on that. I think for physicians, one of the things that we struggle with, and certainly for me personally, how do I personalize, whether it's physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, whether it's an ABA approach? I think that's one of the things that I certainly struggle with, because we have a number of providers in our community, but which is best? And that's an area that I think is really would be a wonderful opportunity, be it for AI intervention to actually be able to do an assessment, or someone like yourself to be able to say, look, it appears to me you may benefit most from X or Y. I think that's a very definite need that's not being fulfilled, at least from my perspective.
All right, and yeah, that's true. We need to, getting back to matching approaches and strategies to individual profiles. So the next question, and some of you have answered this in quite a bit of detail already. So if you have, I'll ask you probably to just summarize what you said, and that is the next question is describing your approach for supporting autistic individuals. We did hear quite a bit about that. Jonathan, you gave us some amazing information about what you do. So maybe a summary of that or something that you might not have gotten to will be fine. And let's see, let's switch up the order a little bit. And let's see if Bill Peters is here to tell us about his approach.
Yeah, I'm here. How much time do you want me to take, Stephen?
Let's take 4 minutes. We're gonna do for this one.
Talk. All right. So, my approach is always a community-based and autistic-led approach. Almost always. That's the easiest and best approach I take in my work. It has to be family-led. It has to really be autistic-led. And you have to do communication in between myself and the autistic I'm working with, myself and the family I'm working with, and the community around the autistic that I'm working with. And that is really my approach. That is always my approach. My other approach is something I call building bridges, which is something I want to work into a future organization I might want to start on my own eventually someday. Just building bridges between autistics and their families and the communities around them around the world. And really honing in on inclusion by building bridges. Really, I am all about the autistic being the center of how we do these things, but also making sure that we are connecting them to the wider community, wider society, wider world. That is my approach, and that is always my approach. I really do understand people, doctors and people who look at other things, but my approach is always about community, always about connection, always about family, always about making sure you build those connections for life. Because if my world started out when I was a boy, it was just mom, dad, siblings, but the world is bigger. It's my neighbor, it's my friend, it's the people in my community. Maybe it's the place my family goes for religious worship, etc. You have to make these connections. And inclusion has to be more than just inclusion in school or inclusion at home or on the playground. It has to be in life. And oftentimes with inclusion, we don't take it more seriously than that. We say, oh, inclusion is for school or for my place of worship or work. No, it has to be society-wide. And again, I will yield my time because it's almost up.
All right. So some great insight here, focusing on the community, autistic and family-led. Communication. That's the only way we're going to successfully interact with each other. And that point about inclusion, it's a state of mind as opposed to a place. Inclusion doesn't just happen in school. It doesn't just happen at work or some specific places, but it's a state of mind that we carry everywhere we go. So let us move on to, let's see, we'll move on to Jonathan. It looks like John might have disappeared for a bit, but we're on to Jonathan. You're on.
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. Just before I jump in, and I will keep to 4 minutes, by the way, I did want to add something to what you and Alan, you were talking about in terms of individualizing. Alan, you were saying it got OTs and people I'm trying to work with.
Mhm.
I think it would be very helpful if within our field, different professionals and treatments provided a label. This is just an idea I'm throwing out to our panel and people. You know, with medication, there's a standard of labeling medication. And on that label, it'll say, this is what this medication does. And by the way, here's the indication and the contraindication to it as well. And by the way, don't take this medication if you're driving or drinking or something like that. Imagine if we had such a system of labeling for different therapies and approaches and treatments. If we said, hey, this particular occupational therapy approach works for this age group or this type of profile, and by the way, it doesn't work for this, and by the way, you shouldn't be doing it if you're also doing this other thing. This would be phenomenal for parents. I'm sure all the parents listening would go, yes, we would love that. Instead, I feel over the years that most approaches, and this is a bit of a criticism, but I'm going to say it, tend to sort of say, we sort of can serve everybody and we do lots of things right across the board. I mean, I think that's problematic, but I'll pause there. So back to sort of my approach, Stephen, as I said earlier, is multi-treatment. I'm on the treatment side of life, not or the therapy side, not on the diagnosis side. So when a child and a family come to me, I'm trying to help them. My goal is to help them find what is going to be a best fit for their unique child, as I mentioned earlier. In that approach, I really, really respect and appreciate Bill's voice in this. Bill, as you were saying, it must be autistic led, and you're saying that the autistic voice must be in that conversation as much as possible. We want to facilitate that, whether it's a child, a teenager, an adult, to include them in their life planning, include them in the inclusion process, include them in what feels good and feels right. It makes sense. And I also appreciate something that Bill said, which is a part of what I do, which is really including parents and empowering parents. So for example, if I'm doing a training of a doctor, a nurse, an OT, a therapist, a teacher, I mandate whenever possible that the parent is there. And we want the parent's voice to be there as well. So in summary, my approach is building treatment plans that are multi-treatment. They come from, I'm drawing from all sorts of things, matching to a profile with the parents at the center of that and the child at the center of that, with love, acceptance, patience, and playfulness. I think it's so important that we bring humanity to what we're doing and not just a clinical approach, but we're dealing with real humans and real emotions and real people, and we must help them to feel loved and accepted along the journey of change and growth and development.
All right, so some very good input. The better we can communicate, the better off we are, whether it's medicine, whether it's a support method or techniques. There are certain things, it's good to recognize that there are certain approaches that are good for certain things, and taking it up to the next level, everybody has interests and strengths in particular approaches. Not all of them. Nobody can do it all. So we need to, one, focus on what we do well, and then secondly, know when we've reached the boundaries or the limits of our abilities, and it's time to say, you know, I think Jonathan really has something that you need, so I'm going to make a referral over to Jonathan, and he'll be able to help you in the following ways, and Jonathan will be able to do a similar thing, and perhaps suggest that the family contact Bill Peters for a better understanding of their autistic child. So that's great to hear. Let us move on to John. And we're looking at describing your approach for supporting autistic individuals for 4 minutes. So I'm not sure if John is here.
John, are you here?
Well, let's jump over to Alan until we figure out where John is. Maybe he's having difficulty with, I can see yellow in his yellow triangle, which means he may have a bad signal. Alan, 4
All right.
minutes, let it rip.
Well, before I get started, Jonathan, I'm going to put your feet to the fire. I love your idea. There's what's known as the Cochrane Report. I encourage you to take a quick look at that as a templated thought process. I don't think it's where it should be, but there's an opportunity here that maybe should be explored. So my approach, so I'm an old school doc. I was taught by this elderly gentleman who was absolutely phenomenal. His name was Dr. Bastyr. It's actually a school named after him, a university. Make a long story short, you look, you listen, you smell, you do all of the components that are really essential for an examination. No, you don't walk in and somebody's staring at a computer. That's absolutely the antithesis of taking a history and doing an exam. An exam means being present. It means really taking the time, which is, of course, one of the big issues in medicine is the time frame. Hence my being a concierge physician. No, I don't stare at a computer. I actually have a pad of paper and a pen in my hand. That's how I like speaking to folks. I think one of the other big pieces that gets missed in medicine that is the way I practice is all about options. I know that there's more than one way to skin a cat. You just got to think through the process, and that conversation needs to be present with both the patient and perhaps their caregivers, dependent on the circumstance, and be able to have a conversation. Doctoring is a conversation. It's a team sport. Very different than what most people encounter. I actually choose patients who prefer that and suggest that patients who just want me to write a prescription or do something foolish, I'm not the right guy. I know it's not going to end well, and I'd rather have a success in my hands and on theirs. So from an approach perspective, a good history, absolutely essential. Takes time. And no, it's not 15 pages of form. Why? Because you have to really get a sense, who are these folks? What do they do? What are they exposed to? What are their expectations? All of that is critical. What's their past history with medicine, as an example? Have they been on a medication? Did they crash and burn? Did they do well? What happened? Those are the parameters that I think from an approach perspective are essential. It may be a little different. It's not current medicine, admittedly, but it works. And I've seen that work for 40 years. I'm going to continue in that venue and suggest it would be nice if we regressed, do a real physical, do a history that makes sense, and then have a conversation with your patient. That's the approach that, to me, is the essence of medicine.
Yeah, that makes good sense, and certainly use all your senses. You have 5 outer senses that you can use when you're learning about a person, be it a doctor, a clinician, educator, or just getting to know somebody. You use all of your senses in the process of doing so, and that's a really good way of looking at it, focusing on what you do, and also the knowledge that you can't, that doctoring is a team sport. And again, communication. So let's see, we've got John, who is, he must have rebooted something. We'll get back to John unless he pokes right in saying, I'm here. But it looks like he's having some internet issues. We're going to the next. This is a shorter response. We're talking like just a couple minutes, just a 2-minute response. And for this one, the question is, what is your most important takeaway from your work with autistic people? And so let's see, let's go to I don't know if John can interact or not. But Bill is looking pretty interactive at the moment, so you're on.
Repeat the question one more time, Stephen. Thank
All
you.
right. So again, the question is, what is the most important takeaway from your work with autistic people? What have you learned?
What have I learned? I've learned that you really have to center on the autistic, their family, and their community, and building bridges and building skills from interests, from things they like to do, helping introduce new things from there. These are the things I've learned along the way in doing my work. Really, it's my passion and I love doing it. So there we are.
All right, and that's absolutely right. You're centering on the person who you're supporting, whether they're autistic or whomever they might be. That's just good practice. And then secondly, start with our interests. One of the characteristics of autism that's not often mentioned in diagnostic criteria is the widely varying skill set. And there's all kinds of statistical ways to represent that on IQ tests, other standardized assessments, and so on. And what it translates to is the stuff we're good at, we're incredibly good at. The stuff we're not so good at, well, we're probably going to need a lot of support, and there may not be that much in the middle. So it's a widely divergent skill set, which makes it even more important to learn what those interests and strengths are of the autistic person. Every autistic person I know, yeah, hold on a sec, Bill. Every autistic person I know who is successful has found a way to parlay their interests and strengths into something society values, and usually that translates to some sort of employment. And Bill's got a little bit of an add-on. You didn't take all your time, so go for it.
I was just going to say what middle, because it hardly ever, as you say, it hardly ever exists. It's either we're great at it or we're horrible at it. A middle zone hardly ever exists. I can think of one or two things where I have a middle zone, but it leans in one direction or the other. It really doesn't exist.
Yeah, Bill, you're hearing this from the proverbial horse's mouth. And the same holds for myself as well. All right, so thank you for that important insight, Bill. And we're going to move on to, let's see. Let's talk with Alan about this.
So I think the takeaway is all about the individualization. I mean, I've seen from low functioning to absolutely amazingly functioning individuals. I think that the other is, and again, I'm going to challenge you, Jonathan. I want to find the sweet spot that really amplifies the potential for each individual. Be that whatever therapeutic, be that whatever other piece we can put into play. My takeaway is there's so many opportunities, and I'd love to see how we can really maximize those for individuals.
Alan, you said put my feet to the fire earlier and challenge me. I'm just trying to understand what the challenge. Are you saying yes, I'm agreeing, or is there a question I can answer? I'd love to answer it.
All right,
great.
Let's get to that.
Let's open that
up. Dr. Allen and Jonathan, there's so much to talk about, and we're going to have a little section after this on what you have learned from your colleagues, where we can get to those types of questions. And I just want to make sure that we keep rolling along so that we get everything in that we need to get in. So anyways, working with autistic people, Alan, individualization, that is key. Another thing to keep in mind as we're talking about terminology as well. And terminology changes with the times. As we know more, we do better. And what we're seeing now is a turning away from categories such as high and low functioning autism, because they both overgeneralize the situation. I know many people who might have been classified as high functioning, and they can do some things better than anybody else in the world, but there still remains challenges with that widely varying skill set So that's, for example, the person I'm thinking about, she'll never find employment the way we think about finding and keeping a job due to challenges in understanding hidden curriculum, unspoken rules, sensory issues, and so on. So is she high functioning? Is she low functioning? And then so many people who are classified, and usually it also means written off as low functioning, until by design, or sometimes even by mistake, they happen to be near a keyboard and they peck out a word that nobody had any idea that this person could even know. And we find out what the difference is that we haven't provided them a reliable means of communication. And that's probably the biggest thing, or the best thing that we can do for an autistic person. Find a reliable means of communication, maybe spoken like we're doing now, maybe by typing into a keyboard or pointing at pictures. Many non-speaking, and that's the term we use now as opposed to nonverbal, because nonverbal suggests the person doesn't understand language at all. Well, what about the autistic individual or other individual, stroke victim, for example, who cannot speak, but they understand language, what's spoken to them, and they just need to communicate in another way. And I've spent hours texting with non-speaking autistic people. And the only reason I know they don't speak is because somebody told me or I met them somewhere. But other than that, we're just rocking along in the process of communication. So instead of low and high functioning, which is kind of a low functioning way of talking about autism, we can talk more about support needs, high support needs, low support needs. And it's also going to depend on the environment as well. So there are some environments where Bill and I, we're doing just fine, and we don't need support or minimal support. And then there's others where we need all the support we can get, and that can be generalized to the typical population. So, for example, we take any one of you, and I'll make a big assumption that nobody here knows how to speak Chinese. We'll toss you at the end of a train line into a small Chinese village. Everybody's speaking Chinese. There is no English. And you're kind of helpless without support. So it's highly environmentally dependent. And it's good to see that John is back to us. And we're on the question of the most important takeaway from your work with autistic individuals. We're nearing the end of our time here, so we're just going for a 2-minute description of what you have learned from your work with autistic people.
You're talking to me now?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Okay. What I've learned is that software for this program is incredibly clunky, and I've been cut out for the last 40 minutes. And there's no way. I have a lot to say, and there's no way I'm going to try and say it in 2 minutes. So I honor you all. I've been listening. I can hear you all. You're all experts, and I really love what you're doing with the planet. And I have a sense of humor. I don't know why this happened, but anyway, I'll have to get my message out some other way, but not on this venue.
Jonathan Graham, I would love to connect with you. I'd love to tell you about my work and swap stories.
Yeah, that's great. I'm at johngraham.org. Any of you want to contact me, and you can learn all about me. And I'm a weird outlier here because I am a high-functioning Aspie. I call myself an Aspie. I love that term. I don't like
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
And I've learned a lot. And my wife and I do a lot of programs on Aspie NT marriage. We call ourselves the mixed marriage, and I'm not going to go into it now, but we do a lot of programs, and we have a lot to offer. And I think a lot of people can benefit from our interventions and the way we have lived for 45 years in this mixed marriage. So not now, you got no time left, but maybe some other venue, but yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that contact information, John. And that way we can get in touch with you, all the listeners and us here on the panel, to continue the conversation. So now we're going to do a quick round of what have you learned from your colleagues tonight that you didn't know before, and how are you going to bring that into your practice? And let's see, who's going to go first? Who wants to go first on this one?
All right, I'll do it.
All right, Alan, you're on.
So thank you, Stephen, for addressing my verbiage. I appreciate the input. Gives me a different perspective. I hadn't seen it specifically that way, so I will address that. So thank you.
You're welcome. We're a learning community, and we all learn from each other.
I'll jump in just really quickly here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mine is really more of a confirmation, if that's okay,
That's fine.
rather than a brand new insight. But just, hearing Bill, I really do so value the autistic voice in conversations like this and professional panels as we're talking about a whole population of people. It's so important. And your passion for parent involvement and community involvement has really confirmed for me that I want to keep doing that, continue to make sure I turn to parents, listen to parents, talk with parents, and also to the autistic individual. So thanks for just kind of confirming that with your passion. And I'll just say one thing. You were talking about building bridges earlier. You said, I think I might do a program. Just for you to know, there's a book called Building Bridges by Paula Aquila, who Stephen might also know, Paula Aquila, and from Toronto, and OT, and Ellen Yak. But they have a book called Building Bridges. So you're kind of tapping into a name there.
All right. That's great. We all learn from each other.
Yeah.
And let's move on to John. For what you've heard from us.
No, you already heard from. Yeah, no, I've learned a lot from all of you. Like I said this before, and I think you're all great professionals, and what you're doing is really valuable. What I have to offer is more first-person stories about how it is to actually do all the hair-raising things I've done in the foreign service. Also, how to live a successful marriage as an aspirant, and I've learned a lot. Like I say, my wife and I do programs together, trying to help people with our intervention strategies on functioning. But the some other time. I don't want to take up now the tail end of this because some other time.
All right. Well, John, it sounds like you've learned how to live life.
I have. And again, it's johngraham.org, and anyone listening to this can contact me.
All right. Well, I think we've had some great discussion, and I think what I've taken away from all of this is that there's so many viewpoints and so many vectors in which we can support autistic individuals. And the key is for us to understand how our work, you might say vectors in, to make it a word, vectors in to the profile and supporting the profile of the autistic individual. So I don't know if we have time for Q&A or not. Maybe we'll hear from our organizer. If we don't, then it's been a great discussion with you.
It's been a blast.
Beginning of a discussion. We've just barely started.